the first year we almost kind of doubled what that revenue goal was. I think our first year we ended up like 1.2 million in
Holy cow. Wow.
in
Okay.
sales. Yeah, and that was from basically April 1st to the end of the year. So that for those first 4 COVID months were kind of just like throwaway months. So it was like drinking from a fire hose, and we got all the sales that we could handle. And now lifetime we're up to, I think we're just past 13 million in revenue for the history of how long since we've been around. But yeah, like year two, I think we shot up to 1.9 million. The year after that, I think we eclipsed two. Then the year after that, 2.5, and then like almost 2.8. Last year we did just above 3 million. This year with the acquisition of the new business, we're going to shoot for four.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tracer Franchising Podcast. Today we have Ryan Pape with Archadeck, who's going to be telling us about his experience as a franchisee. So let's just go straight into it. Thanks for being here,
Okay.
Ryan. Let's just start with just a big overview of who you are and what does Archadeck do?
Okay. So yeah, Ryan Poppy, Indianapolis, Indiana is where our home base is. Archadeck is an outdoor living contracting franchise. So we build decks and pergolas, paver patios, screen porches, pretty much anything outdoor living. We'll do outdoor kitchens. We don't do pools or anything like that. It's kind of like that goes beyond the scope of what most of us do. But it's a pretty diverse set of things that we do commonly. Here in Indianapolis, we specialize a lot in the decking and the porch market, just because those are the kind of things that we do really really well.
Very
Get a lot
cool.
of
And how
demand
many
for.
territories do you have?
I have a total of four.
Four territories.
So basically, our territory stretches from well, if you're familiar with Indiana, Lafayette down to Bloomington and kind of everything in between. So it's a very, very large area. But yeah,
Okay. And how long have you been doing this for?
I signed my franchise agreement in August of 2019 and didn't
Okay.
really launch the business until after training late in 2019. So really, January 1st, 2020 was the start date.
Okay. Great. So about 6 years. Um,
Yep.
okay. Perfect. And so now we got kind of the overview of you and the franchise. Let's dive into you, right? So tell us your background. What were you doing before you started the franchise?
Okay. My background, kind of, I mean, it was very, very different than what I'm doing right now. Um, I wasn't in construction. I wasn't in sales. I was actually in the design industry, and we did various e-learning stuff for the manufacturing industry. So it was an interesting job, but overall, it was just one of those things that I just I couldn't see myself in that role any longer, and I wanted to get out there and meet with people and build stuff, do something physical, but also start my own business. I always wanted to put my money where my mouth was. Everyone always thinks they can run the company better, I feel like, and I felt like you know what if I tried to do that for myself and see if I could really do it? And
Hmm.
that's kind of how we got here. But I enjoyed my previous life, but um, again, I always felt like I could accomplish more, and that didn't lend itself to that.
Okay. So you were a designer, which wasn't expecting. And then you wanted to do something more, but what drew you to franchising? I mean, there's a million ways I guess you could have gone, right? What
Yep.
drew you to franchising?
Um, kind of out of the blue, really. I wasn't really drawn to franchising. I knew I wanted to do my own thing. I didn't know what avenue, so I always tried to think of, what's a good idea? What business would be a good idea that I could invest in that I'd be successful with? So I was always searching for something unique,
Mhm.
like that $1 million idea. That never came. Um, every time I research something, someone's already doing it or doing it really well. And I needed something safe, so I could venture out, and I didn't want to risk everything that I had, even though obviously opening a business is always going to be pretty risky. But I wanted something that was already established. So franchising found me. Um, I put a few, notes out on LinkedIn and stuff like that of, looking for career coaches and stuff like that. So a franchise recruiter who I didn't even know was a thing back then reached out to me and really gave me the introduction to franchising. I thought it was all Subways and restaurants and stuff like that. Kind of opened my eyes regarding what franchising actually is and what you can do with it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a good point, right? A lot of people are still kind of thinking it's all food, and there's
Mhm.
everything under the sun, right? If it's a business and it's not like a tech company, there's a franchise for it. Um,
That's what I found out.
yeah. Okay. So you start talking to this recruiter, and you I mean, I guess this wasn't the only franchise you looked at, right? So like kind of tell us how you got to deciding on Archadeck.
Well, he gave me my disc profile and kind of found out what I would be good at and kind of what type of franchises I would be good with. And based on my kind of interests and skill set, Architect was the one that really only kind of resonated with me. They gave me a couple other options. Honestly, like out of three options, I wasn't really going crazy on just researching everything under the sun. Architect just kind of immediately stood out. And then after I did the first couple of vetting calls with some of the management there, it stood out even more as the opportunity, as well as the people, how they talk about the business, and then talking to other franchisees. It really just kind of stood out versus a couple other vetting calls I made, as well as the earning potential, not t- no brick and mortar location. So everything just kind of worked for exactly what I was looking for.
Okay. Awesome. So you kind of had an idea of what you wanted, and the research process involved talking to the franchisor, talking to franchisees, doing your financial modeling. And then I guess you met them in person at some point too, right?
Yeah, they they had, I forget what they call it now. I think they call it an E-Day now, where you go to the franchisor location. There's in Richmond, Virginia. So I went there to meet with everyone and make sure we're a good fit for one another. And luckily they believed in me, and I had a lot more confidence meeting them. And we just kind of hit it off, and that kind of sealed the deal. After I convinced my wife that it was the right thing to do. That was probably the hardest thing of everything.
Yeah, for sure. The spouse is always like super important in this. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you decide you want to move forward. And talk numbers if you want to talk numbers, or we need to do it high level, but like you determined how much you needed to start the business. How did you decide to fund it, and what was kind of like the path you went to making that decision?
Yeah. So, I mean, based on information that they shared with me, I we came up with a plan for the first couple of years, how much money we were going to need to fund, the first couple of years, and make sure we did it safely and not kind of threading the needle and scraping the bottom of the barrel, and just enough. I wanted cushion, just in case things went south, and COVID they did, and luckily we had that extra money. Um, they had a recommendation of kind of how much money we should bring to the table for capital, and I took their recommendation. I got an SBA loan,
Okay.
and the process back then wasn't fun by any means, but I heard it's a little bit harder nowadays. But the SBA was basically my initial funding, and I am proud to say that I paid off that SBA loan a couple of years ago.
Oh wow.
So
'Cause that's a 10-year
yeah,
loan. So you did it in like 4. That's great.
I think I paid it off at the end of 2024.
Wow. Yeah, that's really great. So
Yeah,
about
so
5 years.
that was a big goal of mine, to
Yeah.
make sure that we can run the business as debt free as possible as soon as possible.
Yeah. Yep. Makes sense. Okay. And then did you leave your job to do this?
I I made the transition. I gave my job probably 2 months to just have a nice steady transition. I didn't want to burn any bridges just in case this didn't work out. So I gave them all the time that I felt like I could. Yeah, but I quit my job and went into this full speed ahead, and I don't feel like I could have done both simultaneously. I don't
Yeah.
think it would have been possible just because of how much work it requires to get this up and running.
Yep. I think that's key, right? Is like a lot of people feel like it's too risky to leave their job, but I think it's too risky to keep your job, right? Because it's like hard to do both at the same time, like you just said. Um,
Yeah, having the right amount of money and then also being having a supportive spouse helps. It also helps if she has a job and insurance and stuff. So that definitely played a part into it. So the whole scenario really worked out in our favor. And I get that not everyone has that, blessing to rely on, but also the SBA funds. Some of that was used for salary and stuff in the beginning, but I also paid myself um, as minimal of a salary as I could to basically live,
yep.
and make sure our family was taken care of. So I ended up paying myself about I think probably my entry salary when I graduated college.
Yeah.
So we dropped down a lot, uh, to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. So that's it's kind of the before, right? Um, Decision making. So once you start the franchise, there's a training and ramp period. So could you kind of like tell us a little bit about how that went?
Yeah, the training was pretty intense. It was 3 straight weeks of being in Richmond, Virginia, during the early part of December. So I was there, I think, December 1st through the 20th. Um, and I'm far enough away where I'm not going to go home on the weekends, so it's a long time and another big commitment. And I think that's going to vary obviously per franchise, but considering how much you got to learn in those 3 weeks to basically go from no construction knowledge to being a construction professional, a lot of knowledge is needed to talk about that and to do it successfully. So the training thing was certainly a very, very big and very important component of what we did. A big undertaking, and the training after the training was just as important. Once you got home and started, putting these things into practice, um, then their support meant probably even more as that ongoing, support system. And that was another very important thing to me. As we got going, I just wasn't thrown to the wolves and say, "Hey, you're good now. You got it." They were there when we needed them.
Very cool. So, and let's what number franchisee were you? Were you early or was it pretty big system when you joined?
Oh, their franchise began in 1980.
Okay.
So I don't know what number I am, but there was another person that owned the Indianapolis franchise about a decade before I picked it up. I don't know what happened there, but yeah, it was, but it had been long enough where the name recognition, everything was all gone.
Yeah.
Um, we get occasionally a couple people that might call us saying they built Archadeck built their deck 20 years ago or something like that, but we got to re-educate we had to re-educate the whole market on who we were and what we do. But yeah, I, I I would assume I'm pretty high up there in terms of the number of franchisees that went through the system since they've been around for a while.
Awesome. Yeah, and that sounds probably on par with the type of training and support that you got. Um, so when we talk about support, was it like a one business coach? Did you have multiple coaches? Was it weekly calls? I don't know if you can remember that far back then, but like, kind of what did it look like?
So after training was done, their franchise coaches were more or less, they kind of have specialties of this guy specializes in construction and pricing. This one is more the soft skill person that helps you with your financial planning, how to do phone calls, how to conduct meetings, sales stuff. So there was, as you became more accustomed to the system and the people, you had a much better idea of, I have this question, I call this person. So they had a really nice, well put together team, and I always felt like I got my question answered. And it was probably, at some points daily. I was emailing or have a phone call with somebody in one of their departments, just because of how much stuff there is to get this business running.
Yeah, very cool. It's great to hear. Yeah, that support. Um, and then what about like licensing? Was that an issue? Did they help you with that when you first got going?
So they do help research that kind of stuff, but um, Indianapolis here is relatively lax on like a lot of required licensing, but they helped us where we needed. There's a couple of licenses we had to go get, and we researched that together. I mean, a lot of it's still on us to make sure that we're getting all that correctly, but they definitely help with the checklist of like, hey, make sure this gets done. You're set off with a kind of a big, huge to-do list that takes multiple months to accomplish, and that kind of stuff is on there for sure.
Okay. So from, the signing to like running the business, doing your first quote, um, what was that timeline like?
I think within the first month, I was quoting people out.
Oh,
And again, it was January, so not a lot of leads are coming through in January, especially when you're just getting going. I mean, you're lucky to get a few leads in your first month, but we were taking appointments and we were going through the doing what we got to do. I don't think I didn't sell a job until, oh well, that's a whole separate conversation. But we were doing proposals and everything through late January, February, March, and then for the foreseeable future. But I didn't sell my first job until March 31st, mainly because of COVID and kind of the
mm,
huge pause that everyone had to undergo, and kind of paused a lot of people from doing anything
yeah.
when I first started.
Yeah, yeah. They thought if you were gonna come to their house, like you were gonna kill them with COVID.
Yeah, it was bad,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It was
not fun.
crazy. Okay, well, I'm glad you made it through there. All right. I mean, it sounds like the training is good enough where you're getting off the ground, the marketing is good enough, bringing in leads where you can start quoting pretty quick. So that's cool to
Yep.
hear. Um,
Yeah.
and then when you got started, was it like just you? Like, what was the team look like when you opened the business?
Just me.
Yeah,
It was just me till about September of that year. Then I got my first employee. I mean, I should have hired that employee probably in May. It was just like once the COVID ban lifted and the stay at home and all that stuff lifted, like things went kind of crazy, and I wasn't prepared for that. So, we're drinking from a fire hose for the first 4 or 5 months there, and then not even realizing that I needed help. And then I got some people that I knew to help temporarily, and then finally hired my first employee about 9 months or so in, and then had to train them and everything. But that was an office manager.
got it. And so I'm guessing you're using subcontractors, right? Like you're not building decks.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That was another very difficult thing back in the COVID days of the huge construction boom. All the subcontractors that were any good were all kind of taken. So we're there. We got to kind of find. It takes a lot longer to find someone that was good enough to do the quality of work that we needed. So we had to sift through a lot more contractors, and really feel confident. And we went through a couple guys, they didn't work, and found a couple guys that were adequate and did the job well enough that got us going. And I still feel confident that the work and everything was done correctly in the way it absolutely should have been done. It was just a lot more difficult back then to find qualified people.
Yeah, yeah. But it's easier now.
I think just with the demand dying, there's definitely just a bigger pool of people. Plus, also better name recognition. Just we're a little bit more of an attractive workplace now that we had the kind of track record, and we have other employees and crews that we can refer other people to. So I think it just all those things put together. um, it's not easy to find really good help, as it is for anybody, but it's not quite as bad as it was back then.
Okay. And did you start with 4 territories, or is that something you expanded? You, like, added territories as the business grew?
So we started with one. Our
Okay.
one territory was fantastic, and it was like I couldn't have drew it any better than what they gave to me. So gladly accepted that. That was more than enough to get me going. Um, and then I always part of my goal when I started was to own the whole city, really. Buy the southern territory and kind of get Indianapolis on lockdown. But a guy stepped in about 10 or 11 months or so after I started and, picked up the Southern Territory. Luckily, he was a really nice guy. Great. He's now a friend of mine. And so that was a mixed blessing, honestly. I couldn't get exactly what I wanted, but at least the guy that moved in was someone that was going to be good to work beside, even though obviously our businesses are completely separate. So at one point, we kept on getting, people that were interested. We're told by Empower Brands that we got some franchisees that are interested in the additional Indianapolis markets, and we kind of made a collective decision between the two of us that we were just going to buy up the remaining territories. So he picked up kind of that very southern Indianapolis area, Bloomington area, and then I picked up kind of the rest of the northern Indianapolis area and Lafayette. And then we were good to go from there. But then I bought his business in late August of this year. So
Wow.
that is essentially how I acquired the additional two territories and circled back to that goal I had a long time ago. So now that's kind of how we got all four territories.
Very cool. Very cool. So, were you able to purchase that? Like, I always hear these stories about seller financing. Or were you like going back to the SBA and, hey, I need a loan for this much to buy this guy out?
Now timing was very very much on our side. Where if it was a couple years earlier, yeah, I would have had to pursue financing options. But I always been pretty cautious with spending money, so I had the money, um, in on a investment account, partially in various accounts where we just don't leave business funds to just do nothing. We put them to work, in investments. But I took some money out of that to purchase the business. So going back to that, remaining as debt free as possible. If I don't know if I would have made the same decision if I would have had to take a bunch of money out, because obviously we determined what the purchase price was going to be and worked on that for a while, and we came to an agreement. And he has a good situation too, so he had a lot riding on this. We had a lot riding on this, so we found a common meeting area, and luckily everything just worked out, and for him and for me, and me not having to get any more debt involved to make it happen.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. So, can you just kind of take us through, right? So we know that you hit a boom once the COVID restrictions were lifted. You hired your first guy 9 months in. Um, how many people do you have now? What did that hiring process look like? Was there like ups and downs? Like, just kind of take us through that growth phase to where you are now.
Yeah, growth was a ever evolving thing. um I kind of found I hired based on my weakness, as well as the positions that I didn't enjoy doing as much. So I kind of found out pretty quickly that I was, strangely enough, better at sales than I was at uh, construction management. And I enjoyed that part of the job more. So I decided it was the most beneficial to the company that I remain in the sales position and that I hire out for the construction management position. So that's what I ended up doing, and went through a couple of construction managers before I found the one that we have currently. And, just probably went a little bit too long on some of the guys that I did hire, but we did end up finding the right person. And then they kind of, that relationship works great now. And I can't say enough about um, the person that I have working for me currently. I have another one too that came with the business purchase. Um, as kind of an employee that I inherited. And then shortly after that, I hired my first salesperson because I just had too much demand and I couldn't handle it all. and I had to sacrifice way too much quality of life to kind of meet up with demand. I don't want to turn people away because the leads that we get, we pay a lot for those, because of our rather lofty, hefty marketing investment. So in order to make the most out of those leads, I had to have some help without, sacrificing my entire, you know, family life and everything to make it all happen. So that was another big hire. I think right now we have the two construction managers. We have a helper for them, which basically helps run materials and stuff like that. A salesperson, myself, office manager, and I have a dedicated marketing employee now who basically that's her job is to manage our marketing. Um, and then I'm currently looking at hiring an additional salesperson as we speak.
Wow. Okay. Um, and so I'm just taking notes here. So, you're at is that 6 or 7 employees?
I think it's seven. With I think the next employee is going to be eight.
Yep.
I think, and
Okay.
then that should be enough to take us because with the business acquisition, we have to now adopt. I got another salesperson in here to take up for the business we have to generate on the south side that was being handled by the previous owner. So that's the big position we have to fill. And then from there on out, I mean, we have some revenue calculations that if once we hit a certain threshold, then we might have to hire another employee. But we got some wiggle room once we hire this final employee to get to a next couple of revenue thresholds without having to hire anyone else.
Nice. Yeah, and that's I mean, you have to invest kind of in the infrastructure, right? And you go to the next step and
Yeah.
yeah, makes sense. Okay. Very cool. And then you hit on something that I think a lot of people think about, which is family time, right? So like what was your hours in the business getting going and what is it kind of gone to over the years?
We'll just. I mean, COVID had a lot to do with it, and the big COVID demand that was probably the first 2 to 3 years almost of just like this tremendous demand that came our way, and it wreaked havoc on the family life for sure. During the first probably 2 years, 80 hours were pretty common, a week, or probably more than that some weeks during the really heavy months, spring and summertime, where it's like your night and day, every waking hour is pretty much dedicated to getting stuff done. And that's construction management. That's, getting new sales, design drawings, proposals. And this was also before we started doing what we do virtual meetings now. And we didn't have a showroom a lot back then either. So this was going out to everyone's house, and that's a big time commitment right there of driving, from wherever you live to, it could be an hour away for a lot of these clients that we have.
Yeah. Yep. And what I mean are you still working 80 hours a week now?
No, no. Now it's a lot more manageable. Again, it's seasonality. The business is very much tied to the season. Um, we don't get as much business in December and January and February as we do in the spring and summer months, just naturally because people don't think about it as much. But yeah, everything now is manageable. I've learned how to manage the business as well as not have to invest as many hours because I have the right employees in place where I can delegate a lot of important responsibilities to these people, but also know that it's going to get done correctly. And that just takes a lot of time and trust to get to that point. But when it does happen, it's like magically you have your life back. And that was a good day when we finally figured that out.
Awesome. Yeah. And it feels nice too knowing that like, when you first start a business, it's like no one's going to love this as much as me. No one's going to do this very well. But then you find that right person, you train them right and they go off on their own and then, you talk to them for the weekly check-in and they're like, "Oh, this thing happened." And you're like, "Oh my god." And they're like, "Yeah, but I figured it out. Now boom 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 and now it's good." And you're like, "Wow, I love this person." you
Yeah.
know? So it's a good feeling. Okay.
Yeah.
Next, I want to ask about sales, right? That's another big thing is like people are like, oh my God, I can't do sales. I've never done sales. And you've brought it up a couple of
Yep.
times, right? So take us from like, how involved are you in, I don't know, however you bring in customers to closing that final sale? And what does that look like?
Yeah. Before this, I had my sales experience was working at a restaurant as a server. That was really the closest I ever got to selling anything. Um, that was a kind of I had to learn from the ground up. I think a lot of that's, the system that you're being taught. So that was a big focus. I did a whole week of sales training, and then that's constantly, I mean, it's one of the things you always do. Practice on sales and new techniques and getting better at your trade. So yeah, that's a huge, huge thing. It was obviously more difficult in the beginning because you're still figuring it out. So figuring out how to talk about these things. And in our industry, you got to be confident in what you sell, and that comes through, to people. And they don't want someone messing with their house if they don't feel confident in them. So
Mhm.
building up that confidence, can take a little while, and then just continually refining that sales process of I took what Archadeck gave me and then customized it for my own personality. But still, the general gist of the sales process remains the same. But I did want to make sure that it was me talking and not, some piece of paper or, some robotic statement. So you got to make it your own, make it sound as natural as possible. But yeah, that's something I mean, takes up all pretty much all my time now. That's, my main job right now is focusing on sales and getting new customers through the door and getting them to sign a contract. But yeah, it's also probably the most fun that I've had. It's completely opposite of expectations. When I signed the agreement, I was like, I'll probably do the construction management part, and I'll hire out a salesperson as soon as I can, and just the exact opposite happened.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. Because what I hear is, like, it's not like when you hear sales, you kinda feel icky, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but really, you're going into people's homes, they're talking about this dream, and you're helping them, like, fulfill their dream to have this house that they've always wanted. And it feels good, right? Is that kind of the experience that you've had?
Yeah, yeah. I don't ever feel like, some people will treat you a little bit differently because that some people don't want to be sold, and that's not really my approach either. They're initially maybe a little bit more standoffish in the beginning. Once they realize that we're just here to have a conversation about what you want.
Mhm,
During our initial meeting, I'm not very salesy. I am in the fact that I am talking about our business and how we do it, and how we do it hopefully better than anyone else. So we're always kind of selling the business from an educational perspective of, I want you to be confident, and I want you to know that I know what I'm doing. And we want to go through every single detail. I want to listen to what you have to say. And then, with that information, I'm going to give you something that you actually want to buy. So, it's everyone's, I think most people understand it's in their best interest to, we get together and we have an honest conversation about that, and money as well. We
mhm.
don't want to go through the whole thing, and then they don't have enough to support the dream that they want to build. So that's another important part of the conversation that we always got to bring up, but it's going to be brought up at some point.
Yep, yep, okay. Yeah, so it's really just, asking the right questions and helping people, you said, get and understand what they
Yeah.
want. Okay.
Yep.
Um, and then, uh you brought it up, and I wanna circle back to this, is Empower Brands owns Archadeck, right? So,
Yep.
a lot of people hear private equity, and they're like, "Oh, I don't want private equity," right? What do you think Empower Brands brings to the table? And, are there warnings you would give to people as they're considering whether they should go with a private equity backed brand or a non-private equity backed brand?
Yeah. I mean, as long as the core of the core values of the company don't change with, the type of ownership, then I don't feel all that affected. I know that they've undergone. They used to be outdoor living brands, and then they were bought by Lynx, and now it's Empower. Um, that didn't really affect us because I think the management and the ownership of Empower Brands and outdoor living brands, they had enough. They wanted to keep the core of what the business was the same, regardless of, I think, who owned it and what type of ownership it was under. So luckily, after this transition occurred, sure, I'm generally curious and want to make sure that everything stays about the same or it improves. But that's kind of what I found out was nothing really changed. The same people were still there. They had bigger goals and they had, some differences here and there for sure. But, for the most part, it remained much of the same. When people are vetting this stuff out, I would say, I don't know if they have a lot of control over it because I didn't know about it, in the beginning. Um, I just thought that, the company was just going to be what it was for the foreseeable future. So I don't know if there's anything they can do to prevent that unless they actively know about it in advance. I just make sure you know the company values and you believe in the people. Because I know that the upper management in that company, I know them all pretty well, and I think that they do have not just their own interests in mind or the board's interests. They have the interests of the people that are out there doing the work as well.
Yep. And I think there's a you can kind of see the history, and Power Brands just has like they hold these things for a long time. Brands always end up doing really well. The franchisees are always really happy. And there's private equity brands that are not like that, right? So, um, yeah, I think it's just like you said, making sure the values align. Okay, very cool.
Yeah,
Um, Next, if you don't mind, like, do you can you hit like your kind of like what your revenue growth look like and what your goals are for the next 5 years?
yeah, sure. um, when we finish training, we're they kind of give us a revenue target, based on what the area looks like, your territory, all that stuff. So the first year we almost kind of doubled what that revenue goal was. I think our first year we ended up like 1.2 million in
Holy cow! Wow.
in
Okay.
sales. Yeah, and that was from basically April 1st to the end of the year. So that for those first 4 COVID months were kind of just like throwaway months. So it was like drinking from a fire hose, and it was part of the problem, but also part of the solution. So we had to learn really, really quickly. We had to really figure it out very, very quickly because I didn't want to miss opportunities. And for better or for worse, I didn't. And we got all the sales that we could handle. And now lifetime, we're up to I think we're just past 13 million in revenue for the history of how long since we've been around. But yeah, like year two, I think we shot up to 1.9 million. The year after that, I think we eclipsed two. Then the year after that, 2.5, and then like almost 2.8. Last year we did just above 3 million. This year, with the acquisition of the new business, we're going to shoot for four. So a really big
Yeah.
jump this year. But again, we have two more territories that we can rely on now. So we want to be a little bit more aggressive with our goals.
Wow. Yeah. Very very impressive. Do you think right that you could hit I guess, 6 with the 4 territories, and then you kinda get stuck based on that territory, and you're either gonna have to, like, look outward or just kind of maintain? Like, what are you thinking?
I don't know if there is a cap really. I think
Okay.
it's just the cap would just be how much of the market share do I want to go after? Where is that happy point where okay, we've kind of gone to the point in which I want to take the business. I don't know quite where that is. Um, we made goals before I bought the business. I took a trip down to Richmond, sat down with their leadership team, and we formulated the next, kind of what the next 3 or 4 years look like in terms of revenue growth and stuff like that. So obviously we have from 4 million, we have a growth, plan to do, like 4.75 and then 5.5. And then if we can get to six, maybe that's kind of the cutoff point, um, without having to then reinvest into the business. And I think that's when we're going to have to make that decision. And, where that cutoff point is on now, we have a completely different scenario. We have to hire more people, more overhead, more pressure on me to make sure that we keep on repeating this. We've grown every single year we've been in business, but I don't know if that's sustainable forever. It might be, but we want to. I want to do it slowly, the right way. Other than this big jump that we're going to do this year, and I think we're ready for it. But after that point, I think it's just going to be year after year, kind of assessing. Because I feel like the economy hasn't been normal ever since I started this business. So, you know, nothing feels normal and never has. So I feel like I'm always just on my toes. But you know, we're gonna take it year by year and just kind of see how far we can take it.
Very cool. Yeah, and I think, this is very indicative of, like, the reason you hit, over $1 million, you're like, "Oh, I was working 80 hours a week to maximize everything," right? If you had chosen, said, "Hey, I'm not gonna do more than 50 because I wanna spend more time doing whatever else," right? You wouldn't have hit that, and I think that just goes back to, like, people always like, "Well, how much money can I make?" And it's like, "Well, how hard are you gonna work?" And I think you're kind of a testament to that. Um, okay. And then very
Yeah,
cool to hear your growth goals, right? And that also shows that even at 5 million, 6 million, ultimately it's the owner who it's just a lot of work. Every time you grow, it's a lot of work. And you have to decide, look at your life, look at your personal goals or whatever, say like, is this what I want to continue investing into? Right. Um,
yeah.
or do I want the fruits of my labor? Like you've been working really hard. They'll be, 10 years down the road. Maybe you just want to break, and you're okay doing that number for 5 years or whatever.
Yeah, those are definitely things that are all big factors of what's family life look like. You know, because the kids are going to be around for the next at least probably almost 10 years. I'm gonna have another kid in the house at the bare minimum. So there's only so far I really want to push it, but with the support of my wife, we might modify those goals. There's also, your long term like retirement goals and how much you want to have saved up, what type of retirement life you want to have, what year you want to retire. All those things kind of factor into it. And typically the larger more time you spend in the business, the larger the business grows. Maybe you might be able to reach those opportunities sooner.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
I think a lot of the first 6 years here have been a lot of reinvestment in growing the business. And at some point, we got to probably stop doing that, and take some of those hopefully business profits and take those out and use them for long term purposes that aren't necessarily business related, but always keeping money in the bank. But at some point, we do have to maybe stop reinvesting in the business. But that's a year by year discussion
Yeah. Yeah.
with a
And that's just
financial
like
planner as well.
living with ambiguity, right? Which is another, I think, a big part of owning a business is like you just have to be to know that like you're gonna go out and do what you can do, but the market might change or the employees might change or whatever might change.
Yeah, because I also want to establish the business at some point will need to probably be sold.
Mhm.
So you always got that in the back of your mind of what revenue threshold, can I sell the business? How because resale your buyer pool probably goes down a lot, I would think, as your revenue increases because your business becomes more valuable. Probably got a few less people in the pool to buy a business that's expensive. And that's a thought as well of how far we take that versus can I how successful will I be reselling it if we do reach that revenue threshold.
Yeah. I think it's the other way around where like a small business is very fragile, right? And it's like almost all dependent on the owner. But a big business has like layers and has people and
Yeah, yeah,
and I think you see like there's like a point where people want bigger businesses, right? And sure, like at some point you might have to turn to like lower middle market private equity companies, but I think that number is like way higher than what most people think, right? You can get a $5 million SBA loan, and it's like that's within the reach of a lot of people. Um,
yeah.
so
That is a long term goal to get to a spot in which it's not no longer really reliant on me
yeah,
to make all the day to day decisions and eventually get out of the sales workforce and just more manage the company versus working inside of it. That's another long term plan that we have established within the next probably 2 or 3 years. Um, and obviously that should make everything more valuable as well. But
yeah.
a goal to work towards for sure.
And has your like who you work with change as you were hitting these goals, right? Because like 0 to 1 million or 0 to 2 million, you have different challenges. I'm assuming than 2 to 4 million, right?
No, in regards to
At the
challenges.
at the franchisor, like, do they have a coach that's like, "I'm gonna get you off the ground and doing numbers, and then from there,
Mhm.
I'm gonna help you create more structured business now that you've hit
Yeah.
scale," or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the planning definitely changes, and
Mhm,
we have some larger Archadeck offices,
uh,
and you kind of you try to emulate them, especially if they're roughly in your same geographic area. You talk a lot. The franchise peer group, is just as valuable as, maybe I don't want to sell them short, the franchise business coaches, but the peer group as well, the other franchisees, if they're the type of system where the guys are, all about helping one another, that can be a tremendous asset towards growing your business as well. Of, talking to them when, I got guys that I call randomly that I feel like, it's kind of like reaching out to the business coach of like, this guy owns this type of business. It's at this scale. I want to be, I want to be like him, and I'll call him and see how he got there or what
mhm,
he's doing currently with his marketing plan. um, but yeah, that part of that part of what we get in return with this business is pretty invaluable. You don't have to rely on random people on Facebook or Reddit, for like fellow business owners that have no idea what your business is all about. All these people know what you're going through and know what your goals are, and they can help a lot more. And that information is sometimes invaluable.
awesome. Okay, yeah, that's great to hear, right? Like, I think a strong franchisee group, is, like, something that people need to check for, right? Um, when they're doing their research. Okay, um,
Yeah, absolutely.
the next big question I have for you, right, is the big thing right now, right, I hear from people is like, "I want B2B, I want recurring revenue, I want sticky revenue, I want a need, not a want." This is the opposite of all those things, right? This is like a one-time B2C, big purchase, not necessary, like, but you're crushing it, right? So, what are your thoughts on, um, those like, just those things, right? Like, having those things as a not a necessity in the business.
Yeah, I mean, been fighting that battle ever since we started. It a lot of sometimes it's a need, but at the very most, I mean, every now and then, but for the most part, yeah, it's a want, it's a desire, to improve their quality of life. And I think that you have to, number one, you got to find the right target market, the people that can spend the money on purchases like these. Because yeah, in most cases, it'll be one of the most expensive purchases they ever make, besides their home. Most people, I mean, we have some people where they build a structure, and I'm sure they probably never, their home might have not even been as valuable in some cases as what we built. Um, but yeah, finding the right clientele with a good marketing plan will help a lot. Because if you're targeting incorrect people that don't have the ability to afford what you're building, then you're just kind of wasting your time. So that's one of the biggest pieces. And then know how to cater to your market. You gotta have certain processes in place. A more higher end residential customer has certain expectations that you got to match, and rightfully so, because you're charging a premium price for a premium product. They want a premium experience in return, and that's just kind of what they're used to, and that's perfectly fine. That those are the expectations that we want them to have. Because if they have low expectations, then honestly, we're probably not the right customer. We're probably not the right contractor for them. And that does come with the price tag that we uh, give to people is definitely not going to be the lowest in the market. So is definitely, we don't have any reoccurring revenue. Unfortunately, we haven't found that magic maintenance stream or anything like that quite yet, because a lot of what we sell is no maintenance. We promise a product that doesn't require any maintenance. So selling any type of monthly reoccurring maintenance package doesn't make a lot of sense in most cases. So, we got to take each customer for what they are, and every customer's a journey, especially if it's a big project. It takes a while, but the people are out there. You just got to find them and know how to take care of
Yeah.
them.
And do you think it's a big enough, sturdy enough, um, market that, we have a '08 style recession, right? That you're gonna still just keep chugging along, and it's not gonna be that big of an effect.
I think going back to finding the right people, um, there are some people that where recessions have less of an impact than other people, depending on their job security, their investments, everything. I'm sure there's more hesitation. It takes longer sometimes to make these sales and to convince them
Mhm.
that we're the best company to handle their needs. So yeah, I do think there's an impact, but a lot of times it just means you have to work harder to get the sale. Like back in the COVID days, it wasn't quite shooting a fish in a barrel, but um, sales were a little bit easier to come by, just because the demand was so incredibly high. But I think when it comes to times like this, the good companies really separate themselves from the kind of fringe companies and the mediocre companies and their processes and how they go about their business and treat their clients. And I think that makes all the difference. And in tough times, I think people want a sure thing. They want to make sure they're not going to lose any more money. And that's another thing that we kind of promise them and always try to deliver on.
Very cool. Okay. Um, and then can you talk about, like, the hardest part of the business? Like, what's the thing that, every day is, maybe not every day, but, like, is the biggest challenge or obstacle for you?
Yeah, I think it's just always the unexpected, because a day can be going perfectly fine and everything's going well. And then suddenly, you have some kind of construction issue that comes up, or something, when you have enough employees have problems and they need time off and stuff like that. And, something might hit you like a ton of bricks. Adaptability and everything that comes in handy. You got to be personable, but you also got to understand the other side of the equation. You do enough projects, you're going to have some homeowners get mad at you for something you did. It may not have been your fault, totally unintentional, but this is a big deal to them. We want to make sure that we hold up our end of the bargain. So sometimes we have to, hearing complaints from customers is never easy,
Yeah.
about anything, and I hate it. But I also know that we can't be perfect on everything that we do, and in construction, whatever can go wrong sometimes does go wrong, even if you try to control all the variables. So those types of issues in my particular industry, can be pretty difficult. But again, having the right people in place means that, it used to be I get a problem and they call me on a Sunday because they got, ice on one customer, ice was forming on their gutters and we weren't quite done with the roof tie-in yet. So water was very slowly leaking into their house. So what did I do on a Sunday afternoon? Went there and just started chipping away at ice so we could divert the water and make sure it wouldn't go where it needed to go. Um, so luckily we have people in place where they look for that kind of stuff, and make sure that everything's nice and tight before the weekend, so we don't have these types of issues. Um, and just other people sharing in the burden, as well. When the customer has a problem, I'm not I'm not the first one to know about it anymore. A lot of times I don't even know about it because I tell my employees, like, if it's not something I need to be involved in, you know what to do. Just make the right decision, what you believe is the right decision, and you know I'm almost guaranteeing that I'm going to agree with you. Even if I don't, I will still understand that you did what you thought was right. But if it's a big thing, then I always tell them, like, get me involved if it's a big thing that's going to be expensive or we got an angry client or something like that. Um, but most of the time, they just take care of it.
Nice. Very cool. Okay. And then what's the best part? What's the part that makes you, like, smile every time it happens?
I think, just having the satisfaction that you get to a certain stage and you feel like, it exists because you made it that way. And, that stuff that you did, that hard work those long hours you put in the end, it all kind of, it's mostly worth it. The sacrificing with the family and stuff. I can't say sacrificing your family. It's a very personal. decision and time with your family at all. I think everyone has to make that sacrifice at some point. How often you do it is a very personal question. I don't enjoy doing it, but it's definitely one of those things that you got to have a very fine balance. Um, and then if you do that, you do want to hopefully um, make sure that it was worth it.
Yeah.
And obviously, seeing your business grow because you made the right decisions, because you reinvested, because you ran the business smart, and you got the help you needed. That can be very rewarding in the end. Even if you're not making a tremendous amount of profit, you can still feel really good about what you're building and what the potential is.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. You want to make sure it's worth it. And, you've built something definitely to be proud of, right? I think it's like 15% of businesses cross the $1 million mark. And, that number gets very small every million above it. And you've been
Yeah,
flying through those goals. So, um, okay. And then for people who, listen to this and they're thinking about franchising and they're like, oh, that sounds like an interesting franchise. Like, what would you say is the right person from maybe like a personality perspective might be the best way to say it or whatever you think, and what would be like the wrong person, right?
I think the right person is a blend of a lot of things. You got to be outgoing. You got to be personable, especially if you're dealing with people. I don't know many franchises that aren't going to deal with people. I think like service based businesses like ours, you got to have a good personality on you, um, and you got to be willing to put in the work, um, and willing, if you want to grow your business, put in the effort to do that. Um, but those characteristics that I think make people successful is they're constantly analyzing their business, trying to improve it. If something's not working, they're not complaining about it. They're trying to do something about it. They're fixing it. If their marketing is not working, you know, it's not it's a lot of times it's not the marketing company. It can be, but it might be you're trying to go after the wrong person. A lot of it's you got to take a lot of ownership of your decisions, and it's not something where you're going to blame other people, because ultimately you're making all the calls for the most part, and you got to have a lot of trust in yourself and your decision making, and obviously you got to have the money and all the financial things in place. You got to be in a comfortable position in that regard. Have hopefully a supportive family, a supportive franchisor, and there's a supportive system. And then I feel like it might work out. And you got to listen too. You got to be a good listener to the people that you're working with, your customers, as well as the franchisor, because you're buying that system. You're not just buying the name. You're buying the system that they have in place. And if you go off and do your own thing, then what do you even, just go do your own thing.
Yeah.
If you feel like you can do it better, go through the vetting calls of like, I don't think I want to listen to these people. I'm just going to go do it. And I would highly recommend you just go do it. But yeah, if you don't want to follow the system, then I would not purchase a franchise, because that's what it's all about.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I think that's great advice. We'll wrap up here. Is there any parting thoughts that things that you wished you knew when you were starting this process?
Yeah. I do a lot of vetting calls with prospective Archadeck franchisees. And if they haven't mentioned it yet, the portion how I always end that call, would be just, have you taken account in, your family life and your personal life? Have you really thought about how this might affect it if things go well or if things don't go well? Because I think they're a problem either way. And you got to really make sure that if you're going to limit yourself, then you're probably going to limit your growth, and you're probably going to limit how successful your business is going to be. Are you going to go after it no matter what? Um, again, going back to that support system, and especially if they have young kids, you know, are what are they willing to sacrifice? If it's nothing, then maybe franchising is not right for you. Um, or maybe it's something you do in 10 years. You save up and you keep on thinking about it. But the way it impacts your family life and your personal life, it can be very significant, I feel like. And it was for me, and it's one thing that I thought about, but I didn't just realize. how much of an impact it would be and how much it would change things. It, I mean, nothing bad came out of it. It was just, just one of those things that I did not fully understand going into it, how much of an impact it would have on my personal life and family life. But everything's good now. But it was rough there for a while when we were first 2-3 years starting this up.
Yeah. Yep. Great advice. You got to love the game, because if you're just waiting for an outcome, you'll never get there, right? You got to love the things that you're doing, um,
Yeah,
because it's a journey. And if you don't, like you said, if you don't want to do the work and you don't want to enjoy the journey, probably not for you. And it's different
yeah,
depending on where you are in life, right? Like you said, there's
yeah, yeah,
whatever.
very much so.
Okay. Cool. So I appreciate that. Josh Amundsen with Tracer Franchising. We help people find great franchises and do the research. You talked about finances. I've got a workbook with models that people can take a really good look at their own personal finances to see if this is right for them. I also make sure things are available. So if you don't know if Archadeck's available in your territory, let me know, and we can find other ones if not. And then I help with research. I've got an app as well as I like to think some of the most in depth questions out there to make sure that this is a good fit and you're thinking through exactly what Ryan was talking about here. So uh, tracerfranchising.com. Okay, thanks Ryan. Really appreciate you being here, and best of luck. I'm sure you're going to be hitting those goals in no time.